Welcome to The Snap with Alexis Perry and Sydney Jones.
Happy Wednesday, Broncos country, and welcome back to the Broncos Podcast Network for another edition of The Snap. I'm Sydney Jones, joined as always by my co-host Alexis Perry. Alexis, a brutally tough and cold loss on Sunday. I don't know about you, but have your toes defrosted yet? Because I know mine haven't, and I know you were outside that whole entire time pregame.
Yeah, unfortunately, Sydney, I cannot honestly report that I have completely thawed out since Sunday. We do this really fun pregame show outside at the Mile High Monument, Broncos pregame live. And myself, Steve Atwater, Matt Boyer, our entire crew, we were out there literally freezing our tushies off. But a big thank you to everyone who tuned in for that. So that wasn't all in vain. But speaking of pregame, I know the Broncos heading into this game knew that they were going to need to play a near perfect game in order to beat the Chiefs. So once those self-inflicted wounds really started flowing, it was clear that the Broncos were going to have a tough time waging a comeback up against the defending Super Bowl champs. We all know Patrick Mahomes. He does not need the defense to score 14 points for him. He is fully capable of doing it himself. So it was definitely disappointing that it wasn't a little bit more competitive, but I think the Broncos learned some really valuable lessons in that game that they can take into this week up against the LA Chargers. I personally know I learned a ton of lessons about socks, hand warmers, feet warmers, just what it takes to be outside in the cold for a couple of hours to do those pregame shows. So lessons learned all around.
Well, Alexis, it is a new week and we're getting ready for a new opponent. So we're just going to turn the page and look ahead to the Broncos-Chargers matchup. The Broncos are in the Mile High City again, looking for their first win at home this season. And on this episode of The Snap, we have a very special guest to help us preview that matchup, Chargers team reporter, the lovely Hayley Elwood. Hayley, thanks so much for joining us on The Snap today.
Thank you for having me. We were kind of coming on and it's so funny. It's like we're all in this group chat together, but we have not met in person. And so this is great. This is awesome because this is the first time that we're really getting to virtually meet, but this will be fun. Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, Hayley, before we dive into this game, can you actually start by telling us what your role is like with the Chargers?
So my role as the team reporter is a little bit of everything. So it's a combination of video work, podcast work, and editorial work as well. So videos, now we do it all on Zoom, but player interviews prior to the COVID pandemic, when we had a thing known as the preseason, I was also working as the team's preseason sideline reporter for broadcast. And then editorial work, just writing articles as needed. That's actually how I started with the team, which we might get to later on in the show. And then podcast. I host a podcast called Playmakers, very similar to this one. So I'm always here to support women supporting women and lifting everyone up in this industry because it's crazy, but it's so great when we can do that as well.
Well, you do such a fantastic job. We truly love following your work. And speaking of which, work has to be pretty fun for you right now with all the hoopla surrounding your rookie quarterback turned starter in Justin Herbert. How have things really changed around LA since Herbert was named the starter?
To reference things that the team has talked about, this is why they drafted him 6th overall. You know what I mean? He was the face of the future for this team. Unfortunately, what happened with Tyrod Taylor was a huge setback, and the way that Justin Herbert found out seconds before kickoff, essentially against the Kansas City Chiefs in week 2, was just incredible. But I think what we've seen from him so far is that it's very, very clear that this was the guy who the team envisioned him to be. And to me, what he's done without a preseason, without really anything in person until the very, very end of training camp, has been extremely impressive to watch. And it'll be fun to watch him go up against the Broncos on Sunday.
Yeah, Herbert is definitely a guy who's made a difference on the field, and we certainly saw that this last Sunday. He's coming off that dominant performance against the Jags, 3 touchdowns, 347 passing yards, and he was also the Chargers' leading rusher. Hayley, were you expecting that?
He put the team on his back in that performance for sure. And I think with the team having 4 straight losses, the tough spot there was the fact that they hadn't been able to really play a full, complete game. And they were down in the third quarter, and the offense led by Herbert willed them back and the defense got stops. But I think what we've seen from him so far, and it's been so impressive to watch week after week, is he keeps getting better week after week. And he has this poise about him that it's never really looked like the game has been too big for him at any moment. And if it has, holy moly, he covers it very, very well. I actually listened to his interview with Dan Patrick today, and Dan Patrick asked him kind of, what's it like out there? You make it look so easy. And he said, it is hard. And one of the big things is obviously going up against NFL defenses, which are loaded with playmakers and veteran playmakers at that you don't normally get in college. But he's made it look like, again, it just hasn't been too big for him at any moment. He's made all the throws. He's got the arm. He's got the size. And yeah, he led the team in rushing. He's got the mobility, which is something that Chargers head coach Anthony Lynn really liked about him coming out of Oregon, coming out of college, is that ability to be mobile in the pocket, which you didn't see with Phillip Rivers over the last 15, 16 years, whatever it was. It escapes me now, but to have that, it's just an added element to have that back there under center.
Well, Hayley, we hope he doesn't get any better come Sunday. Not going to lie there. But what kind of challenge do you think he can create for Denver's defense on Sunday? It seems like pressure doesn't really bother him at all.
No, I think that's a huge part of it. It is that poise that he has in the pocket. And I think it's the ability to make throws and chunk plays. And every game that he's played in this season, you've seen, a 60+ yard touchdown. He had a 70-yard one to Jalen Guyton just last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So be wary of the chunk play, I think, because he's got the ability. And like I said, he's got the arm and he's got the arm strength to really push it downfield, and the precision. That pass to Jalen Guyton, it was as good of a catch as it was a throw. And I feel like we say that every week. He had one to Keenan Allen 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, I guess, because we had our little surprise buy in there against the New Orleans Saints. But yeah, I know. And you guys can definitely speak to that.
Yes.
But just, I think that ability to make the big throw, make the big play, and also just, he hasn't really been rattled back there. So if Denver can rattle him, you guys will probably have some success. But he's had that poise in the pocket, which is something that every single teammate of his and every single coach of his has brought up as a really admirable factor to his game.
Yeah, to blitz or not to blitz, it seems like that will be the question on Sunday. It worked really well up against Cam Newton, so I'm not sure if the Broncos just need to dust off that game plan against the Patriots and apply that to Justin Herbert, or do they need to take more of a Patrick Mahomes approach, which I'm sure would be really flattering to hear, because I don't know if blitzing will be as effective against Justin Herbert, given how cool he is under pressure. But either way, this is going to be such a fun game with these two young quarterbacks going head to head. It seems like all four of these quarterbacks in the AFC West that we see right now will be around for a while. But I do have to know, in terms of the Denver Broncos, what's the local LA buzz around this team, and how do you think these two offenses will match up on Sunday?
I think, Drew Lock's coming back. I believe last week was his first game back.
So it was 2 weeks ago.
Okay. I think it's just kind of figuring out, I think in terms of LA, you guys have a running back that we're pretty familiar with in one Melvin Gordon. He was drafted my second year with the team. And so just kind of figuring out, just how he fits into that game plan. It was really funny because we haven't had a lot of media availability yet this week, since we're speaking on a Tuesday. But Coach Lynn was asked about what's it going to be like to go up against Melvin Gordon. And he goes, it's weird. I've never had to go up against him before in my life, and it's interesting. But he said, look, I think he'll be motivated, but the Chargers will also be motivated too. Keenan Allen said the two of them, obviously they won't be on the field at the exact same time, but he described the matchup as fun. He goes, there's gonna be a lot of playmaking, but also a lot of talking, as I think we both know that two of those guys like to talk. I think I almost wish, in terms of not really an offensive matchup, but if Chris Harris Jr. was healthy to play this week, that would be fun. But again, that opportunity will come likely later in the season, but it'll be interesting. I think we'll see. I think what Melvin can do on the ground for the Broncos will be very interesting, knowing what he has done in the past for the Chargers, for sure.
Well, you mentioned running backs, which gets me thinking of Austin Eckler, who is out with a hamstring injury as well as that hyperextended knee. That is truly a huge void to fill. Who's really stepping up in that role right now?
Yeah, and I think the Chargers running backs by committee, which has really been due to Justin Jackson and rookie Joshua Kelly out of UCLA. I think they're still kind of trying to figure that out a little bit. And look, this offense has gone through a lot of changes. I mean, starting with Herbert at quarterback, once it was made, the decision was made, I guess I should say, that he was going to be the starter of the remainder of the season, but just figuring all that out, because then Austin got hurt and just kind of, it's been a little bit of a work in progress. But you look to Justin Jackson, look to Joshua Kelly. Kelly, again, rookie out of UCLA. He was a walk-on, I believe, at UCLA, transfer out of UC Davis out here in California. And it'll be interesting. I know that they want to get that ground game going. That's something Coach Lynn, former Bronco, he loves, former running back. He loves to get the ground game going. So I think it's up to really those two guys right now and Herbert to supplement. Herbert led the team in rushing last week. It was something, obviously, you don't want that to be your back, but he was able to get done what he did. But I think those two will be the guys you want to look for on Sunday.
Now, Hayley, let's talk about Keenan Allen a little bit. He's been so consistent for the Chargers over the past couple of years. We saw him as Phillip Rivers' go-to receiver, and now he's establishing that same bond with Justin Herbert as well. What type of threat does Allen pose for this Broncos secondary on Sunday?
He's so smooth. I mean, anytime you ask a guy, like, what is the best thing that Keenan Allen does? And it's his route running. He is so smooth in that game. I really feel like he has built such a great rapport with Herbert already that they seem to be just so in sync. Like, they know where each other is on the field at all times, and Herbert can rely on him. And I think it was so unfortunate when Keenan went out in that Saints game that he wasn't able to kind of continue that, obviously, but he picked up where he left off this past week in Jacksonville. He's just such a threat. He's someone, though, that the Broncos know very well. I love these divisional games because you almost throw records out the window a little bit. And I know both of these teams have the same record, but there's something to be said about the familiarity there. Little different this year with the quarterback, but in terms of some of the skill position players, there is that familiarity there, and they always seem to be a little harder, maybe a little closer than we probably think at the end of the day. We'll see what happens on Sunday, but with Keenan, I mean, his route running, again, is just so smooth. He's such a threat, and he's another one who almost kind of makes it look really easy with some of the catches that he makes. I remember he had one this past week, and it was like, you just kind of forget how, or you take it for granted almost just how good of a skill position player he is. And that's it. I mean, he's a threat anytime he walks out on that field.
Well, speaking of the defense and a guy that you had mentioned earlier, who we know really well here around Denver, Chris Harris Jr. He is currently out with a foot injury. So would you say the secondary is now the Chargers' biggest weakness on the defensive side of the ball without him out there?
I just think they're sort of trying to, again, figure it out a little bit, like a lot of the other sort of position groups on the field. You have Casey Hayward, who is just a steady rock at corner. You have guys like Michael Davis, who was undrafted, but yet has proven himself in this league. He had the pick six against Tom Brady and the Bucs just a couple weeks ago. And you have other guys, Rayshon Jenkins, obviously at safety, no Derwin James, which is a huge loss. But again, the team knew that going into this season. So there were ways to overcompensate for that. But I think, they're a group that's kind of trying to figure it out. And I think sometimes when players do get injured and you have to account for the loss of them, then you're sort of, shifting again and trying to find guys to sub in. And then when Chris Harris eventually comes back, there will be, again, that kind of period of, okay, well, now he's back and this is how this group works together. But I think we'll see. I mean, they did give up some plays against the Jags last week, but look, I think this team, again, they were just proud in the sense that they were able to play the complete game, finish all four quarters, which is something that they had not done over the past few weeks and something that has really been the Achilles heel of them in years past as well. So I'm not sure if I would necessarily call it a weakness necessarily, but I do think that there has been, due to injuries, just some movement where they've been trying to figure things out and get positions and assignments shored up when they head into these games.
Last question about the matchup for you. Who, in your opinion, do you think needs to have a big game on Sunday for the Chargers in order for them to beat the Broncos?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, I think ultimately you look at guys like Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa and affecting Drew Lock. I think you look at that defensive line. Melvin Ingram, he came back last week against Jacksonville after missing 3 games with an injury. And I just think anytime that you can get that pressure up front, those guys are bookends. The AFC West has some really, really amazing defensive ends and just pass rushers in this division. Obviously, no Von Miller but no Von Miller for this game. But, you think of him and Chubb, you think of Ingram and Bosa. And I think those 2 guys, if they have the ability to pressure Drew Lock and really affect him, that will ultimately bode well for the Chargers.
Well, Hayley, I know we could sit here and talk about the game with you all day, but let's dive a little more into your career. For all of you at home listening, you know that one of our main goals here on The Snap is to inspire young women looking to work in sports by highlighting some of the most prominent women in and around the NFL. And Hayley certainly fits into that category. One thing I want to talk about, Hayley, is that you also have a podcast that highlights women in and around the Chargers organization, like you mentioned earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about the start of that and how it's grown since?
Yeah, so I started Playmakers a year ago, which is, yes, as you said, highlighting women in and around the Chargers organization, as well as the broader sports world. So we have these really great conversations with anyone from sports broadcasters like Tracy Wolfson and Erin Andrews to women internally like Allison Miner, who's a physical therapist and athletic trainer for us, just one of very, very few women who is an athletic trainer in this league. I started it a year ago. I was just kind of thinking of, what could I do that's a little different? Where can I kind of fill a space maybe in the league, the club podcast world? And I really just wanted to highlight these women, but have really authentic conversations with them where it's not pandering and it's not asking them, anything that's like super gender centric. I want people of all genders to be able to listen to my podcast and really learn something from it. And I really feel like I've been able to do that. And it's been fun. And I think this year I've expanded the conversations a little bit to talk about maybe some deeper social issues that are happening this year. I had Kimmy Chex from NFL Network on, and she's been a huge part of and very vocal proponent of social justice. And she has a Snapchat show. And then actually today I just had a conversation with Tracy Odie Blunt, who's a senior vice president of corporate communications for the NFL. And we talked about voting and the importance of NFL votes. So being able to kind of expand off the field a little bit and have conversations about broader issues that are affecting all of us and the work that we do still in the league has been something that's been really, really exciting for this second season and new for the second season, while sprinkling in some football and some other stuff in there as well.
Yeah, Hayley, you've done such great work on it. And I know I've listened to a couple of your episodes, and you're really one of the first in the industry to have a podcast like this. And I know when Alexis and I first started talking about launching The Snap, your Playmakers podcast was one of our inspirations. I called you at the beginning of it to get your advice on what worked for you, what didn't. So just wanted to highlight that you've done such a great job on it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, Hayley, you've really created a career for yourself, from being an arena host with the Lakers to working Super Bowls for the NFL. But I want to start at the very, very, very beginning of your career. Where did you get your start in broadcasting, and what does your path kind of look like since then?
Yeah, I'll give you guys the Reader's Digest version because it's a crazy one. I think, well, just to shortly answer your question, my first sort of gig in the industry was actually covering high school football recruiting for what was then Fox Sports Next and Scout.com. So like a Rivals, a 24/7 Sports. So those types of sites that cover high school football recruiting. And I got my degree from UC San Diego in communication. It was broad, but I didn't totally have it figured out. I was working full-time at a dance studio. I was working their front desk. And then once I got my college degree, I was promoted to manager. So I was handling everything from payroll to scheduling teachers for classes to literally producing recitals, 2 recitals a year. And I knew that it wasn't obviously my career, but it was a job that paid the bills. So I had a salary, I could pay my car payment and other things, and I could handle that. So it was just kind of trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. And I think it kind of goes back to the environment that I grew up in. Both my parents worked for a local station growing up behind the scenes, but my mom was the community services director / producer, and my dad ended up being the news director. So that was the world that I grew up in. And then I just grew up a huge sports fan and kind of really never wanted the NFL season to end. I was always kind of catching myself like checking out news. And that's when I figured, oh, maybe we'll segue into sports broadcasting. So the Fox Sports Next Scout gig, that was the first gig that I had. And I literally got it by sending the guy who ran that division of it just a DM on Twitter, just kind of selling myself and with a reel. And he called me in for an interview, and whatever happened from there happened from there. I got the gig, and they didn't have anyone covering high school football in San Diego. So that was really cool. And I say this too, I had a conversation with Judy Batista, and she talked about the importance of high school football. And I think so many women now, or men too, they just want to get to the national level. They want to get to covering, the NFL or whatever it is. But there's so many great things that you learn about covering high school. I learned how to talk to players, how to talk to coaches, how to interview, and how to even build those relationships where you talk to a guy at one game about, okay, who's recruiting you, and you verbally committed, and then you keep in touch with him the remainder of the season. And it's very similar to what we all do now with these players that we build relationships with through the years in the NFL. So that was sort of the first gig that I had. And then I got the Chargers, my first job with the Chargers in 2014, and Lakers in 15, and things went on from there.
Well, you mentioned at the top of the show that you started with the Chargers in a contributing writer role a few years ago. So what was that transition like from contributing writer to now your current role with the team?
Yeah, so it was so contributing writer, that was the title. So I was there for 3 seasons when the team was in San Diego. And then when they moved to LA, they brought me on full time in the capacity that I'm in. I think it was such a natural transition, and it was so seamless because I was able to sort of keep up with my on-camera skills on the side. So for instance, the 2015-16 Lakers season, I was their in-arena host. So I was hosting their pregame show, Lakers TV, and I was conducting in-arena contests during the game and reading PAs and everything like that. So I was still keeping up with those skills. So then once the Chargers brought me on full-time, like I said, it was just kind of a seamless transition because, look, I knew everyone in the building. We did have a coaching change at the time. That was when Coach Lynn came on, but knew the players, knew most of the coaching staff, and it was just, okay, now you're doing this for the team, and maybe your interviews, instead of being off camera on your phone, are now going to be on camera. So it was just kind of seamless in that sense. I feel very, very fortunate that all worked out because I was hoping that obviously I would land a full-time job with them. And I think those 3 years that I had, though, again, really, really great experience of building relationships with players on the team and coaches on the team and writing articles and then segueing that into what I do now.
Now, Hayley, you also worked Super Bowl 53 and last year's Super Bowl. Well, I guess it was this year's Super Bowl, the beginning of the year. It's been a really long year.
It's been a really long year, you guys.
It really has. But you worked both of those Super Bowls as a host for the NFL's in-stadium coverage. What was that like? That had to have been so cool.
It's a really, really exciting experience. And it was an experience I didn't ever anticipate getting. Ironically, it happened because the crew that I worked with when the Chargers went to London in 2018, they produce the NFL's international games, and then they produce the coverage of Super Bowls, draft, and all that. And so they had asked me, and it was really exciting. I make the joke, and you guys will appreciate this as a Broncos entity. It never really hit me the magnitude of the event until the national anthem played. And the joke I make is I didn't get emotional like Noshawn Moreno did at that one game where like tears are like literally streaming down his face. But that's when it hit me when I was in Atlanta and the national anthem played. I'm like, holy moly, this is the Super Bowl. This is the event that it's the biggest sporting event in the world at that point. And it's really, really cool to be a part of. Like you said, I do in-game hosting for them for both media, Super Bowl opening night, which is like media day, media night, and then some packages and things during the week. And then on Sunday, I help host the pregame show. So unless you're there in the venue, you're not going to see it, but it still is really, really cool to be part of a team that puts something like that on. And then the team, once kickoff happens, my job has been done and I just get to watch the game and enjoy the game. But the team that I work with, they call the game, they do the graphics in the game. And it's just really special to be part of something like that because there's so many different, you think of radio, TV, so many different entities that make up coverage of that event. And it's been really, really fun and really, really special to be part of.
Now, you might have just talked about it, but I still have to ask, out of everything you've ever covered in your career, any event or any game, what has been by far your favorite and why?
Yeah, so the Super Bowls are up there for sure, just because of what they are. I have a couple. I think Chargers game, I would probably say that game that we had in London, because it was just such an awesome experience to be able to go over to London. It was a thrilling game. It literally it ended on the very, very last play, and they walked out of there with a win against the Titans, which was really cool. And then as far as the Lakers, the last game I ever hosted for them was Kobe's last game ever. And I always said that was, to me, such a huge sports moment because it was just so special in and of itself. But knowing that he is no longer with us, it carries a little different significance now just because of the fact that he isn't here anymore. And that was also really special too, because I didn't anticipate, there was a girl and I, and we job shared. So, because there's so many home games in an NBA season. And so she took half and I took half, and I didn't expect to do that because I think he announced his retirement mid-season. And they kept me on it, and it was really, really cool. So those three things have all been really, really special events for different reasons. And I am not done yet creating memories in this league and in this industry, but it's been really fun to have those under my belt so far.
All right, last one for you here, Hayley. What advice would you give other women looking to get into the sports industry?
Yeah, I think one kind of piece of advice that is, I don't want to say different a little bit, but it sounds silly, but just be nice. Like, be a really good person. This industry, as we know, is so small. So small. My cousin works for the Broncos, ironically. And he's the VP of business development for the Broncos. So we got a little family tie there. That's how small it is. Yeah. But it's an extremely small world. So just always being a really good person, being on the up and up, being positive, it goes a long way. Our head of production here at the Chargers, he used to be with the New York Jets, and I had interviewed with him years ago for an opening that they had. And he then joined the team right before we moved to LA after the move was announced. And I feel really fortunate that I had made a good impression, that, we were able to work together when that move happened. And again, we make the joke, never thought we'd see each other again, but it is an extremely small world. And I just think if you can be nice, your reputation, you could be the best reporter in the world, but if you're a trash person, your reputation is all you have at the end of the day. And I think it goes a really, really long way in this business of just being positive and being a good person and being memorable in that sense too.
Yeah, that's really great advice, Hayley. And it was such a pleasure chatting with you today. Even though you work for the Chargers, we were not going to hold that against you. But thanks so much for taking the time to come on the Snap today, Hayley.
Thank you for having me again. I really, really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. And like I said, happy to support women doing their thing in this industry, because it's awesome anytime that happens.
Well, guys, we are out of time, so that'll do it for this week's episode of The Snap. A big thank you to all of you at home tuning in, and another big thank you to Hayley Elwood for joining us. We'll be right back here next Wednesday for another episode.